Welcome back to Schmitty's Off-Road. Today we're going to do a little bit of a throwback and we're going to do another review of the Pro XP Ultimate. I say throwback because it's been a year since I've done one of these, and it also happens to be a year since my first video uploaded to YouTube. I had a couple before that, just basic ATV videos, but about a year ago was the first time I did my first full edit, purposely filmed YouTube video. I started with about 15 subscribers and now I'm at 400. So thank you guys so much for liking and subscribing. It means a whole lot to me. It shows me that what I'm doing is actually helping some people and people are appreciating it. So thank you, and I hope you guys keep sharing with all your buddies, and we'll continue to ride and hopefully meet up with some of you guys out on the trail this year. I've connected with a couple of you and it sounds like we're gonna meet up and hit some trails here soon. So we're gonna get straight into this review. I'm gonna cover some new products that I've got, some issues with some old ones, and kind of my pros and cons of the Pro XP and any issues I've had with it. And we're gonna end with would I buy it again. So you're gonna wanna stick around to the end of the video and see what I recommend. So we are going to start off by going over the things that I have added since that my very first review. I've got videos on a lot of this stuff, so if you want to see details on how I installed it or kind of like first impression stuff like that, I will link some of those down in the description below, but you can always just go back to my channel and scroll through some of those older videos and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So let's see here. The first thing I did was the SMB particle separator. So I did the fender well version. That's why it's the fender well version. It tucks up underneath in your fender well and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. This was their first version of the SMB particle separator for the Pro XP. Now they also have the roll bar mount, or that version of it, and I think that one's probably going to be your best bet. I have had some issues with this particular separator, but don't let that push you away from SMB at all. They are a great company. I've emailed them back and forth several times and they've continued to set me up and help me get that thing dialed in, and I think we finally got it to where it's working right. We got all new seals. There's actually a bypass harness that eliminates how the motor ramps up as RPM changes. So instead of it being quiet at idle and then as you're going full throttle the fans kick on full blast, it's always full blast. So as soon as you turn the key, that separator is that fan's constantly on. You don't really hear it that much, but I think that's kind of what they were running into with the issues. So having that fan always on is definitely helping. But again, not a bash on SMB. I love the product. The fit and finish is great, and their customer service has been killing it. So we'll move on to the second one. And let's see here. These rigid light covers, they were about 20 bucks each. One thing I was running into with this light bar is, which you can kind of see how that cover works, it just snaps on the top there. One of the issues I was having with that light bar was at the dunes. If it was dusty or the sand was kind of kicking up in front of me, it would almost reflect off of it, kind of like you're driving in snow or fog or stuff like that. And when that light bar is on, let's see if I can kind of show you right up here. So like this is about where you would be sitting. There's like a light beam right here from that light bar, and it just reflects all of those particles. And with those amber covers, it should help eliminate some of that. I know that's kind of why they run it in desert a lot, is you'll see a lot of them running amber lights. It just doesn't reflect back on those particles as much. So I'm going to try those out and see if that helps with that issue. I haven't really had it out much this year and been able to try it out at night, but in theory I think it's going to work great. So we've also got the 4Works carbon fiber hood scoop. This thing is a very nice looking piece. Yeah, it's expensive. It's like $250, but I love the look of it. And if you haven't seen that video, you'll have to check it out. But I cut inside here, not actually the hood scoop, but I cut out underneath, and it helps to funnel air down here and kind of into the tunnel a little bit. I haven't really ran it too much to see if that's going to help with the heat inside the cab. I did go to the dunes a couple weekends ago and it was like 87 degrees and we were pushing pretty hard, and you could definitely feel some heat in that tunnel, but it didn't seem as bad. But it's kind of hard to compare when you don't, like, I wasn't out there like without the hood scoop and then with it, like back-to-back rides, so it's kind of hard to really compare. I mean, every time you go out and ride it's different, so I'm not gonna say it 100% works, but I think it helps a little bit. And there's obviously cheaper options to go with if you want to do that kind of hood scoop method. I know some people even put fans in there, kind of like a little AC unit, and they'll just blow air straight into the cab. So just little things like that you can kind of do to help eliminate some of the heat, but that's one thing I've added. And another thing, let's see here, these kind of go hand in hand. So these door inserts here, and if you can see them, these little block off plates back in here, it's kind of hard to see with my rock block fender flares, but those two in combo have helped keep a lot of the mud out of the machine. I know that's one thing a lot of people complain about, which is kind of funny. Like, you're in an off-road vehicle, but you're complaining about getting dirty. But I get it. Sometimes you don't want to get mud flung all over you. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I don't mind getting muddy, but also some of that can be eliminated with a cheap $25 piece. So those two, the door insert and then that block off plate, have helped a lot with mud. And recently I noticed, I think those block off plates actually help with dust. So I don't know if you can see it in here, but when these tires are kicking up all of that dirt and dust, I think it's getting funneled up into that kind of wheel well up in there, and then it's just getting sucked straight into the cab. And I think that's actually eliminated a lot of my dust. Again, I haven't driven it too much with them on there, but when I was at the dunes, I didn't notice near as much sand kind of swirling in there, and it was real bad last year. So I think those have actually helped a good amount. And let's see here, the last two things that I've added since that last video is going to be my 5150 whips, and I've got the mounts up there are for my grandma's whips. I'll kind of throw some pictures up here, but these are very nice. I mean, they're just magnetic, so you drop your flag in there, holds them perfect. Those are also magnetic up there. And if you want to kind of run something like this, I've got a video on how I installed these 5150s. You got to drill this hole out a little bit bigger, and then that actually fits perfect in there. And bolts, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a flag mount in here already, and it bolts straight to that. Super clean. And another thing with 5150, I started with their basic daytime whips, and the first trip to the dunes, I had some 3x5 American flags on there. Tough break. They did not last in the trees. I'll throw a picture up of that kind of setup. But yeah, we were running hard one night. We were going probably 40, 50 through the trails, which if you've ever been down to Winoka, that's moving in the sand. And yep, destroyed the flags. Two of them, the two big flags got ripped off. One orange flag got ripped off. And finally, the demise of the 5150s, one completely snapped off. So 5150 has a lifetime warranty, which is nice. I hit them up and I was like, hey, do you guys have heavy duty whips? Because I destroyed these daytime whips. Like, oh yeah, for sure. We got, I think it was I think the whips I had were 3/8 inch diameter, and then the ones they sent me as a warranty replacement were 3/4, so quite a bit bigger. And this last trip to the dunes, we were ripping through the trails again. And nailed a tree, and I've never seen a whip change directions so many times, but they survived. So I think those heavy duty ones definitely work quite a bit better. So definitely a believer in 5150. Their lifetime warranty is awesome. And finally, the last thing I have added, which is probably my most favorite, is RPM side by side. They've got some killer products for players and Can-Am, even some Kawasaki. They've been hooking me up recently, and so they sent me their J-tube. There's a charge tube right in there, and then their blow-off valve, you can kind of see sticking in there. And then also their Desert Series exhaust. This stuff is top quality. I love it. The exhaust is pretty loud, but that's not a huge deal. Where we ride, I mean, obviously I'm trying to be considerate of like neighborhoods we might drive through on the way to trails, or just in general like campgrounds. I'm not blasting up and down the drive aisles and stuff like that, so I'm considerate. And trust me, I don't try to have the most obnoxious machine out there. It just so happens to be loud, but it sounds good, so it'll stay on there for now. We might be swapping it up here soon. But with RPM side by side, they just came out with a quiet core. Now I'll throw a picture up here, and it doesn't work with their Desert Series exhaust or any of them that have kind of that fancy tip, kind of like the Desert one does, but their sport muffler, and I know there's some that the Pro R, some of their mufflers will work with this quiet core, and I don't know how much quieter it'll make it, but it will restrict a little bit of the flow, and it'll kind of break up the noise, I guess. I don't 100% know how it'll work. It's pretty much the same as any other quiet core you get with any other mufflers though, and it's super cheap. It's like $20-$25, so it'll quiet it up a little bit. I know some people have been complaining about noise recently on just any exhaust in general, so the fact that RPM is hearing those people and coming up with a product that's going to help them out stay a little quieter, awesome. So what I would recommend is their sport muffler with that quiet core, and you're going to be set. And if you want to get any of this RPM stuff, use Schmitty at checkout, code Schmitty at checkout, and you're going to get 5% off. Helps you out just a little bit. And now let's get into some of the issues I've had. So I already touched on the SMB particle separator, and this is just issues with some accessories I've got. This isn't with the machine itself. So obviously I mentioned the SMB particle separator, which it's working now, so not a huge deal. We've got the rock block fender flares, and this isn't an issue with them necessarily. It's more of an issue with tire rub. I know people, when the Pros first came out, well, even still, people are always like, oh, can I run 35s without tire rub and all this? Well, it's going to depend on the tire itself. Different brands, 32-inch tires, some are 31, some are 33. All of them are going to be different. But if you have rock blocks, I will tell you. So I've ran 32-inch paddles and 32-inch ITP Coyotes, and nothing seems to rub here. But when you look up here, see if you can see that, maybe at this angle, right here, you can see how much thinner that is, right through there. You can kind of see that. So when the suspension is fully compressed, it's going up and hitting that, and it's starting to rub through that plastic a little bit. Not a huge deal, not an issue with rock blocks. That's just something I've kind of noticed, and it is doing it on both sides. This side doesn't look as bad, but it is starting to rub through just a little bit. Nothing too serious. And then one of the other issues I've had is with these Pro Armor skid plates. See if you can see that up there. See how it's flared out? Well, underneath here, right there, these welds are cracking and starting to come apart. So a couple more hard hits on that skid plate and they're probably gonna get ripped off, which sucks because they were a little bit more expensive. I think they were probably $200 or something like that. I'll flash it up here on the screen. They were a little bit more pricey. They work pretty good. I think they look good, and they have that plastic slide on the bottom, so you're not getting hung up on rocks as much, but clearly you hit that front edge and those welds are gonna crack on you, sadly, but not a huge deal. I'm gonna be replacing suspension probably at the end of the year, going short course racing, so we'll see how that goes. Might just be a one and done kind of deal, or I might do pretty good and actually enjoy it. So we'll see. You guys are going to want to stick around for that. That's going to be a heck of a ride. So now let's go into some of the issues with the Pro XP itself. I've got a list here. I'm going to kind of run down it pretty quick. I haven't personally had any issues with any of this stuff breaking or going wrong with me, but it's stuff that I have heard. The first one is the turbo recall, which I actually did have to take that into the dealership, and they replaced the turbo and that whole assembly. You can kind of look into that recall if you want to know more about it, but basically it was a seal where one of the oil pickup tubes went to the turbo, and it could leak, causing an oil or a fire hazard. I didn't ever have any issues, but it was under warranty, so I got that turbo replaced. Wheel bearing issues is another common thing. Again, I haven't had any issues with it. I was going to grease them one time, and it was kind of, part of the bearing was kind of seized to the hub, and I was kind of trying to pull it off, and one of the races actually came off with the hub, and I kind of freaked out and shoved the hub back on and ran it because I didn't want to have to get new bearings yet. And luckily it was fine at the dunes. I didn't have any issues with it, but I do have a set of Kryptonite wheel bearings. I'm going to be doing an install video on those here pretty soon, kind of show you guys what I was talking about with that race, how it seized to the hub, and we'll go through all that in a later video. The clutch exploding. So some of you may have had issues with it. Hopping in the machine here. Some of you may have had issues with the clutch exploding. I have not had any issues yet, but basically what's happening is the towers are weak and they're starting to crack and come apart on people. Kind of a freaky deal. I don't know why Polaris hasn't fixed this yet or addressed it. They've had a couple recalls, but I don't think it ever really fixed the root cause of the issue. So that's a big issue with these Pro XPs. I haven't had an issue yet, and we're at 715 miles, almost 750 miles, and no issues. Another thing with the clutch is the clanking. They are very noisy, and mine has been very loud, but it hasn't caused any issues yet, so I don't think it's a huge deal. It's just kind of annoying when you're going down a hill and you just hear the clank, clank, clank back there. It makes you kind of sound like something's coming apart, but it's normal. So that's kind of just one of my issues / complaints about it, but again, not a huge deal. Another thing is the heat in the cab. I mean, you're going to get that with pretty much any off-road machine, but it is pretty hot in here, and I think a lot of the issue is with those coolant lines running through the tunnel. They can get pretty warm, especially when you're pushing 200 degrees in here, or with the motor temps and everything. So it kind of makes sense that it gets hot, but dang, some of those days it is toasty. The springs is obviously an issue, which I'm hoping I'm going to get that addressed this year. When I get different suspension, I'm going to go ahead and swap out springs and all that. So you guys you'll see that as I'm doing it, but I'll address all that stuff in a later video. But I've got over 700 miles and my springs haven't completely collapsed. Some people have issues with it. Mine are starting to get collapsed, but not to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to spend $1,000 and upgrade them. Shock wear is another thing. My shock bodies have started to show a little bit of wear, and I think a lot of that is the issue with dirt and sand getting stuck between the sliders, and if you don't clean that stuff out, it's just going to rub. And some people are like, oh, your springs are clocked wrong. No, they're clocked at 180 degrees, just like they should be. And I think the issue is just sand and dirt getting behind those sliders, and they just, with friction and all that, they just start revving. The last thing is the annoying oil filter location. So if you've changed the oil on your Pro XP or any RZR turbo, you know the oil filter sucks. It kind of is at an angle on top of the motor, kind of on the front, and I'll show you guys. I'll do a detailed oil change video here pretty soon and show you guys kind of what I'm talking about. I got a couple of tips and tricks on how to not make a mess with that, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that one. Now let's go into some of the good things, and I'm going to throw up a couple videos here as I'm talking about them. But the suspension on the Pro XP is insane. So I've ridden in several XP turbos, XP 1000s, all of them with shock therapy, and I have no suspension tuning done to this thing yet. And honestly, I think it rides better than both of them, especially the normal XP 1000. My buddy's XP turbo, he's got the valving done and he's got suspension seats, so it rides like you're on a cloud. But this thing out of the box is insane. And one thing I was noticing is the harder you push it, the better it gets. It's kind of weird to think like that, but when I was at the dunes a couple weekends ago, we were following a Can-Am 4-seater, and he was like, dude, just push it harder and it'll soak up more of the whoops. And I was like, dude, I don't know about that. And we got it up to like 50, 55 through the whoops, and it would just skip across the top. It was insane. I was like almost pushing my comfort level, but the faster we went, the better it got and the more confident I got. So I thought that was insane. Another thing is the power. The power is very controllable in these machines. I mean, yeah, it's got 180 horsepower, it's got a turbo, but my fiance has been able to drive it no problem. I mean, the throttle isn't super touchy, it's pretty forgiving. I mean, you could probably get into some trouble, but it's pretty easy to drive slow. And if you're just kind of getting into the sport and you want to just putz around, you can putt around in low very easily with this thing and not get out of hand. Another thing I really like about these Pro XPs is the cab. So it's just completely different than any other RZR, and the fit and finish is just awesome. These seats are super comfortable. You have a lot more room in here, and especially like shoulder room. I've been in here with my dad, and he's a pretty big guy too, and our shoulders don't even touch. I mean, there's plenty of room in here and plenty of room down below. I even have my seat scooted back a little bit, and there's more room you could even get by sliding your seat around. Another thing I have really liked about this machine is I have had 0 belt issues. In 700 miles, I have not blown a belt. I have slipped it a couple times, but I take the cover off and clean it, and there's no issues. There's no like burn marks, there's no shiny spots, nothing. So I've been very happy with the belt life on this thing, which some people probably say, oh, you're not pushing it hard enough. I've pushed it about to my limits in the trails and sand, and out in Moab we were doing some slow rock climbing, and I haven't had any issues. I've ran 32-inch tires, I've ran the stock tires, and pushed this thing pretty darn hard, and no issues with the belt. So I'm gonna keep running it. Part of me wants to put my spare belt on there, but I think I'm just gonna keep going with the stock belt and see how long I can make it last. And the last thing I really like about this machine is I haven't broke anything. I mean, yeah, I've put some aftermarket parts on there, but it is so strongly built. I haven't had to replace anything. No wheel bearings, ball joints, tie rods, radius rods, nothing. I haven't bent any A-arms. I haven't done anything. I do wish the A-arms were a little bit more beefy. That would be one of the first things I upgrade if I would buy this machine again. But now that I know what I do know, and some new Polaris have come out, I would probably look at the Turbo R. I really like this platform and that 180 horsepower turbo, but with Turbo R suspension, that would be insane. You're not gonna bend those A-arms doing just kind of the riding I do. Obviously some people have bent them, but it's gonna take a heck of a hit to bend that stuff. So finally, would I buy this machine again? 110%, I would definitely buy it again. It's been Obviously this is my first RZR, but I love it. Everything about it has been amazing. I love the looks. At first I didn't. It kind of looked goofy to me, kind of like a Pontiac Aztec, but now that I've had it for a while, it's definitely grown on me. And the suspension is amazing, power is amazing. I wouldn't want to do anything, I wouldn't want any other RZR. I mean, the only thing I would maybe do is, yeah, go to that Turbo R with the wider suspension, but other than that, this machine has been amazing. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions with anything I've talked about or want to see anything else in detail, let me know. Drop a comment down below and I'll address those comments. And again, hit that like and subscribe button. Helps me out, shows me that you guys appreciate what I'm doing, and we'll see you out on the trail. Peace.